Today's story takes part in the beautiful Campsie Hills to the northeast of Glasgow, and it involves a woman who's brutally killed just above the village of Milton of Campsie. On the 17th of March 1883, James Brown and Thomas Kelly received their wages. Both men worked on constructing the Kirkintilloch Reservoir, which today is a popular angling club. The men lodged at Shields Cottage, along with a few other men who worked at the nearby site. Shields Cottage stood on the site of the White House in the foreground. That morning, Brown and Kelly went to the nearby village of Milton of Campsie to look for new lodgings and soon found a suitable place. The two men then travelled to nearby Kirkintilloch. There, Brown bought a new pipe and then they went for a drink. Kelly drank beer while Brown took some whisky. They returned to the lodging house in Milton of Campsie and had supper. Around 7 p.m, Brown went out once more, while Kelly stayed in for the night. Brown entered the tavern, and while he was there, Rosie McNairn entered the public house. She was looking for someone. James Brown knew Rosie, as she did odd jobs to make ends meet, including going to Shields Cottage and washing the workmen's clothes. Brown asked Rosie if she would have a drink with him. Thomas Kelly would later say that when Rose came to do the washing, Brown and Rosie sometimes quarrelled. But that day Brown and McNairn seemed to be getting on well. Before they left the pub, Brown asked for a small gill bottle of whisky to take away with him. At about 6 o'clock the following morning, Thomas was awoken by James Brown entering a lodging house. Brown was wet and cold and asked Kelly for a loan of his pipe so he could get a smoke. James Brown then lay in bed smoking the pipe. Kelly went back to sleep and woke up again about 11 in the morning, and Brown at midday. Brown said he had lost his cap and cravat, and when asked about how his trousers were so wet, he replied he'd fallen asleep by the roadside the night before. He'd woken up near Shields Cottage and then returned to their new lodgings. On the Sunday morning of the 11th of March, David Buchanan, the farmer at Shields Farm, which stands higher up on the hill from the cottage, got up early to tend some sheep. He was heading towards East Baldron Farm, which he would have to pass. As he got near a gate, he could hear his dog barking. He turned back and followed the dog and found lying near the dyke a woman lying on the ground. This woman was breathing, but unconscious. One of her legs was missing a boot and stocking. It was clear that this woman had received a savage beating, as her face was swollen. A huge bruise covered her forehead. It is telling that the farmer who knew Rosie did not recognise her owing to her injuries. David tried to waken the woman up but could not, so he left her and made his way to nearby Shields Cottage to get some help. James Brown, once he'd woken up and dressed, asked Thomas Kelly if he'd come with him to look for his missing cap and cravat. The two men left the village, Brown wearing a borrowed cap, and they headed up the hill, where they came upon a crowd of about a dozen people standing near a dyke. One of the onlookers said, "That is old Rosie." A halfpenny piece was found nearby, and then a young lad picked up a cap, turned to the crowd and said, "That is James Brown's cap." A pipe, 2 gill bottles, a cravat and comb were also found at or near the scene. At the back of the crowd, Brown turned and started walking down the hill. Kelly followed, asking if it was him that beat the woman last night. Brown replied yes. James asked Thomas Kelly for some money and was handed 5 shillings. He stated he was going to Kilsyth that night. Brown then fled the scene. Rosie Ann McNairn was taken home. Her face was so badly beaten, even her own son, David, did not recognise her. She died from injuries at around 1 p.m. on the Sunday afternoon. On Monday, a Dr. Stewart carried out a post-mortem. He concluded that death was due to several blows to the face and head by a fist or blunt instrument. This attack, the doctor said, would be carried out with able force Death was caused by blood on the brain and was probably accelerated by exposure to the cold. Stewart also said that the wounds could not be caused by a fall or falls.
Explore Provan Hall after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Join us to find out.
If you dare.
James Brown went on the run, and despite a nationwide search, remained undetected for a week. Sergeant Ballingal from Grangemouth was allocated the districts of Mid Calder, East Calder, Ratho and Broxburn. The sergeant sent a constable, Fullerton, to visit Nidri Oil Works, after hearing they had recently taken on a labourer. The man gave his name as James Brogan, but resembled the description given out of the wanted man. The policeman took James Brogan to Broxburn Police Station, where Sergeant Ballingal was waiting. Brogan was taken on train to Winsborough, and from there to Stirling. Asked in Stirling if he was James Brown, he denied it. He was then taken to the county police office where Thomas Kelly was being held. Once the two men came face to face, Kelly insisted that the man he was looking at was indeed James Brown, who admitted that he was a man the police were hunting. Brown was arrested and locked up in Stirling prison to await trial. Brown still had on his feet his heavily tacketed work boots, on which he used to kick Rosie McNairn. It was lucky that he was apprehended when he was, as he had just been paid about 17 shillings by his new employer. This would be more than enough to replace the boots he wore. It was reported that Brown was a native of Pollokshaws, and he was quite cheerful, and did not seem to realise the position in which he was placed by the gravity of the charges against him. James Brown was tried at the High Court in Edinburgh on Monday the 4th of June 1883. He pled not guilty to the charges against him. After all the evidence had been heard, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of culpable homicide. The Lord Justice Clerk turned to the prisoner and said, "You have had a very narrow escape. The jury have dealt mercifully, and I think rightlessly, with you in finding you guilty of culpable homicide, and not of murder. I say they have dealt mercifully with you, because the case was a narrow one upon its facts. And now that a sentence has been moved on the ground to culpable homicide of this poor woman, I am willing to believe, and do believe, that you had no intention of killing the woman. And I believe that you did not know that you had done so, but still the offence was a very serious one indeed. The sentence of this court is that you be kept in penal servitude for 10 years. In addition to this story, the Stirling Observer newspaper on the 31st of March reported that two boys who lived at Lennox Mill were pretending to be James Brown being executed. They were taking it in turns to place a noose around their necks, which of course is very dangerous. One of the boys, Charles Mulwee, almost hanged himself, but luckily the rope snapped, allowing the child to fall to the ground. If the rope had not broken when it did, the consequences might have been fatal. If you've enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. You might like to take one of our dark history tours, ghost tours, or paranormal investigations that are held in Perthshire, Glasgow and Stirling. If so, please visit our website, which is www.historyandhorrortours.com. Thank you.